if you catch up, good luck. Um, I'm Chris Brown, the Vice President of Policy and Research here at CSI. This is our monthly Facebook Live. We are very fortunate to have Joey Bunch with Colorado Politics joining us. This is a Facebook Live Zoomed, so it's just the merging of technologies here. But here we are, and hopefully people on the other side are able to follow along. And if you do have questions, thoughts, comments, please feel free to share them, and we'll see if we can get to them, squeeze them in. So this is a bit different format for us, Joey, right? Usually we're here, we have our events. Sometimes we try to, share our work with you and see where it fits in your stories. But see if I can flip the script here a little bit and get your thoughts and ask some questions of you, put you on the hot seat for once.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Let's just have a free-flowing conversation. Maybe the next time we do this, we can do it in person, and we can get a bottle of tequila and we can do shots and see how the conversation develops. But not, I think I can outdrink Earl Wright, but I don't know if I can outdrink Kristen Strom though. So maybe we ought to wait and see.
I think it depends. It depends on what we're drinking here, right? That'll be so it's a shot for every time someone says, jobs or the economy, right? Well,
fiscal responsibility.
Fiscal responsibility.
Everybody drinks.
Yeah. All right. It's like the Oscar parties, right? But
I think that's what the government does. Every time somebody says fiscal responsibility, they have another drink.
As we're just sobering up here. So great. Well, topics today. What do we want to cover? We have a lot on the plate, right? We're in the middle of session. We are coming out of, pandemic. Recovery is on the upswing. So, we have a couple things, and maybe just lay this out there. Keep us. I think part of my job is as much to see how to get more info out of you, is also to kind of keep us on track. So we're not here till happy hour. Mm-hmm. But let's cover kind of where we are in the pandemic, recovery stories, highlights. Let's talk federal funding, and let's talk public option. Okay. Maybe we'll stay in that order, maybe not, we'll see. But, we do economic research, economic analysis. And what's interesting is sometimes that is the story, and it becomes the story. Sometimes it's just part of the story in this work. But I'm curious, as you've reflected on, or if you have the opportunity to reflect on where we are a year out, it's amazing. Think about this. Last April was the worst month in our state's history, probably U.S. history from an economic standpoint. Colorado lost 370,000 jobs. We've recovered a significant portion of that, but we are still below where we were. 5% of jobs from where we were last March are not here, have not returned. And Colorado ranks 28th right now in terms of that job recovery. So that's kind of, for us, highlight, top level. But what has not been covered, you think, to the extent that's really been needed as it relates to the pandemic and the economy? What is the uncovered story of the last 12 months?
Well, one thing about the press and the thing about think tanks is we never like to admit we don't know. But we don't know. It's been a year, and we don't know what the long-term economic trends are going to be. We don't know what the cultural effects of the pandemic have been. Are people going to still continue to work at home, and that's going to solve our congestion problems on the interstate? Are there jobs, are there restaurants and certain jobs that aren't going to come back? I don't think we know enough yet. But yet we've got legislators at the state capitol, spending money like they're doing tequila shots. And, I think they're flying blind. They've got this money to spend and they don't know exactly where to spend it. So they're going to throw it on political priorities, things like electric cars and these pet projects they've wanted to fund mental health. We can talk a little more specifically about the stimulus later, but I think the great uncovered story is the great mystery. I mean, what do you think? You mentioned all the jobs we've lost, but has this thing been better or worse than you thought it would be? And where do you think the economy's headed?
Wow. Better or worse, it's, we've reflected a little bit, again, trying to figure out where we were 12 months ago when some of those stay-at-home orders first were issued, and saying, okay, well, looks like we're going to be working from home. How long is this going to last? And I mean, I think I'm frankly kind of surprised at the pace of vaccine rollout. You know, I, but I've been, I think, a little more surprised by the sustained level of uh, social distancing measures that's sustained as long and consistently as they have. But I agree with you. I think the long-term impacts. I'm very hopeful. That culturally, from an interpersonal standpoint, we'll be able to, I think, recover pretty quickly. I think people want back to get back to the point where we can interact more, face to face and in a way that we're all familiar with and comfortable with. But I think your point is well taken that there are real, I don't know if the pandemic changed them, but I think it accelerated a lot of trends. It accelerated work from home trends. So that has dramatic impacts on commercial development, that has impacts on energy use, that has impacts on tax revenue. I think it really just, rapidly increased some of the existing trends. But I think that there's a floor to that. I think that there's a floor, and we won't all be working from home. I think that we've also seen the value of in person and working, in an office. I think people recognize the importance there. So, I don't know. But I think clearly for me, it is just the unintended consequences and a better discussion of the nuance, because everything is a trade-off. Everything from a policy standpoint is always a trade-off. And so I just think coverage and discussion on those trade-offs and understanding of how to build better ways to mitigate those those unintended consequences while still maintaining or at least trying to improve some of those public health response, just I think didn't really enter the discussion. It was all benefits and no discussion on costs. So,
Colorado, we bounced back pretty fast, for a tourism-based economy and an economy that depends on oil and gas. It seems as though we're coming back faster. Why is that? I mean, what is it that's carrying their economy?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. I think it's the other thing that's been just fascinating is it's really a major question of haves and have-nots. Is some sectors have recovered fully, some sectors are benefiting professional services, being one of those. But when you look at leisure, hospitality, recreation, I mean, 1 in 3 jobs are still gone from a lot of those entertainment, recreation sectors. And actually, Colorado is lagging relatively in those industries. I think maybe we've benefited from having a more diverse economy, but we're still lagging quite a bit. So I think, and we're seeing that in our unemployment insurance, and continued claims. We're seeing that in discussion on use of federal funds. So, I don't know. I think it's what stood out to me also was Colorado, I think, had a pretty strong recovery. And then November, December, Colorado took a big step backwards through, as we saw a surge, and there was the COVID dial, the infamous COVID dial. I don't know if you covered that at all, but it had some, I appreciated the transparency in many ways and the sort of the way in which they really took a hard look at some of that. But I think it clearly had a pretty pronounced impact on Colorado relative to other states, which is why I think it's been quickly kind of pushed aside going forward, which I hope is something that we study and understand long term. So,
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's
forward then. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But let's say I had $100 I wanted to invest in something that's gonna, how would I divide that up? Should I just bet the whole nut on Kristen Strom winning an arm wrestling contest? Or how would you spend that $100 if you had money to spend right now?
daycare.
For Colorado.
I just put it towards daycare. That's all. That's it. Just it's all going to the kids.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's an industry. The Biden administration, if you look at the federal stimulus, one of the things they want to invest in is these low income jobs like daycare. Is there, if we look at, you know, professional licensing, licensing undocumented immigrants, are there ways to generate the economy on the lower end of the pay scale? You talk about how well professional services have done, but how do we help those people who aren't making very much money?
Yeah, well, so as we kind of transition here a little bit, I think the point you bring up on, okay, so we talked about the pandemic, where we are now. We know the state has about almost $4 billion in new stimulus. That's on top of, well, in total, the state in aggregate will have received over $65 billion in federal dollars. Now that was some direct stimulus to households, that was PPP loans, but all in, I mean, that is an enormous amount of money. Now the state, on top of revenue recovering, has almost $4 billion. And considering the state general fund is 12, 13 billion. I mean, this is a quarter of, or a third, frankly, almost a third of the state's general fund. I mean, this is pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
I think the way I look at it, and obviously as an individual, I think it's the same thing, actually. I would look at it from, do you invest for the future in growth? Like, for instance, if I had extra money, do I invest in acquiring more skills? Do I go back and get education? Do I invest in something that will help me with my job prospects? And I look at it as an investment. Or do I look at it in a way that actually gets my financial house in order? Do I pay down credit card debt? So for me, I think that's a household decision, but I think the state, frankly, is confronting the same decision. To your point, we're seeing some things which I think are more just spending priorities that are things legislators want to do. They think they have the ability to make a difference by spending money here and there on new endeavors. But for me, I think this is a real opportunity for the state to improve its financial house and actually, as I say, pay down that credit card debt, pay down those debts so that we free up future dollars. I think that's the way that they should be, really can be looking at this. And there's some very clear ways through infrastructure investments, whether that's transportation, building capital, the trust fund, replenishing some are part of the trust fund that's going to come due, the unemployment insurance trust fund, or improving the outlook for PARA, the state's retiree retirement plan. So I look at it from get the financial house in order, improve the long-term outlook so you can free up tax dollars in the future for more productive uses, for more investment. So, I have some ideas there, but, what would you add to your wall if you had the $3.9 billion, Joey? Where would you go first?
I would first go to transportation, but you may have seen my column a couple of weeks ago.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say Mardi Gras. I thought you were going to say go down New Orleans.
Big party, have a lot of crawfish and beer. It'll be great. That's how I would spend that money. No, I would do exactly what you just described. What I would do with my own money, which is pay down debt. That's the worst money that you've got, is what you're paying in. That's not always true, but most of the time, interest is not a good investment. But I had a column a couple of weeks ago about, this is not free money that we're getting. We're going to have to pay this money back. Luckily, I'm going to be dead when it all comes due, but at some point, we're not going to be able to pay for social programs in the future because all of our money is going to be going to interest payments to China, or we're going to have to raise taxes. And raising taxes is what usually happens. The great example is, the first war that was fought on a credit card was the Civil War. And what did they do afterwards? They passed a 3% federal income tax. Right. Well, now I'm paying a third of my income or better in income taxes. And altogether, I'm spending about 45, 50% of my money in taxes. By the time you throw in property taxes and sales taxes and fees are just taxes. Look at the list of fees you're paying on your car every time you buy a new car or renew a license. It's just crazy. And so this is real money that we have, and I think this money would be better spent paying down debt. But if they're not going to do that, and they're not, I would spend it on transportation. We've had a transportation problem in this state for as long as I've been here, 20 years. We're $9 billion behind, and now they're proposing. Anyone who's looked at Colorado politics today, I got a copy of the draft bill on this major transportation bill they're going to drop, and it's built on fees, raising the fee or indexing the gas tax to inflation, indexing all these stuff, but also putting on fees and all these different ways to raise money. But it's not going to asphalt. It's going to electric vehicles to speed that transition. Now, that's not solving the problem we have. That's creating a problem that they want to solve. So, is that the best way? I mean, how would you spend the money?
It's interesting. I have not. I think I saw the draft or talked about as almost 200-page bill. So I have not, waded through that one myself. But so are you? What's interesting is there is a process for establishing a plan for infrastructure, a statewide plan, a 10-year plan. Are you saying that some of this goes outside of that?
Oh yeah, all of it practically that's in this bill. That 10-year
Wow.
plan is what they rolled out last year. That's yesterday's news. That was pre-pandemic. And, that includes the things that we need. I've had the good fortune of working for a couple of billionaires now. And as I always say, the thing I've learned about billionaires is they're smarter than us. That's how they became billionaires. And the one thing that Ted Turner and Phil Anschutz have in common is expenses aren't costs, they're investments. How is that money going to come back to me? If I spend a nickel, how's it going to bring a dime back to me?
Right.
I would start there. What is going to pay us dividends down the road, and not just political capital, but human capital, economic capital. But I call this stimulus money, and the grab bag of hopes and dreams, because that's what I see. You look at some of the bills that they've got up there, $3 million here, $10 million there. Pretty soon it starts adding up. But you look at the mental health program, sure, wildfire mitigation, that's a good investment. I think on transportation, they're counting on Uncle Sam to bail us out with the infrastructure stimulus to pay for these shovel-ready projects that's in that 10-year plan. But that's a maybe. We don't know if that's going to happen. And in the meantime, we're spending this other stimulus money as fast as we can. They're looking at $15 million to help watersheds that have been impacted by wildfires. Okay, that sounds like a good investment. But then, we get some stuff out there that, I don't know. Millions of dollars to help rural communities transition to renewable energy away from fossil fuels. Again, that sounds awfully political to me. The National Western Stock Show is getting $3.5 million. I love the stock show. $3.5 million for the state fair. Waste of money. $2 million for the agricultural events across the state.
Fried Oreos.
We're subsidizing rodeos now.
Well, I think if you can look at those issues through that lens and say, is this an investment or is this going to save the state money in the long run? Mm-hmm. It's an important. I think it's an important question. Or I think, or is this addressing an immediate crisis? Because frankly, if we kind of take a bigger step back, we think, well, this is directly related to COVID-19. Are these things that are being directly caused or not, or as a result of the changes we've seen or not, or are they, maybe alternative priorities? Maybe this is a bad segue, but I think we got a question here on, so talking about investments, your favorite football team, Alabama, knows how to invest in good talent. And we have a tough question on Colorado policy here, but who's a better wide receiver, Waddell or Devontae?
Well, it's hard to count against Devontae. People
Who
been
was
saying
staying
that
on the
last
floor?
year. He's the Heisman Trophy winner. The guy weighs 160 pounds with rocks in his pockets. And they were drafted back to back last night. Alabama had 6 players in the first round. But you know what Alabama does that business people can learn a lesson from is they invest in character. I had a boss tell me one time that he'll take somebody with less talent and more character than somebody with terrific talent and not much character. And Nick Saban says that Alabama has always been lucky in that their best players are also that they're their best people. So, I still believe that character matters in this country. And, whatever you lose, in a second in the 40-yard dash, you'll make up in a guy that's willing to work for it. A lot of these big schools, they bring these guys in that were superstars in high school and they can't transition to college because they're used to being a superstar. You come to Alabama, you play against the best. I mean, 1 out of 5 players in the first round last night came from Alabama. There's a reason for that. And they're just like Alabama is just like a billionaire. It's not an accident that Alabama is the best team in the country. Roll Tide.
Well, make sure to let you have the plug there. No, I completely agree. I mean, I completely agree. And, I think it's part of the reason, my background in sports, part of this reason, and inspired to start studying business more and free enterprise issues because of, the overlap that we see in getting the rules of the game right, in competition, in teams of businesses that flourish when you have the right people, right leadership, and don't just focus on explicit talent or individual interests. So yeah,
Quick
it's
buck. People go after the quick buck. Nick Saban doesn't. Guys come to Alabama don't. They're going to sit on the bench a couple of years unless they're just an exceptional talent. But you invest in patience. It's just like investing in your money. You've got to believe in your program and follow through with it, and not take a bad bet just because you think it'll get you somewhere faster. I don't know. If I had more patience, I'd be a billionaire, but I don't.
patience. That's the other part of the formula, huh?
Hey, let's talk about the public option. You're an
All right.
expert on that. What do you think? I mean, we don't have the bill that we thought we were going to have, and I didn't think they would get any bill. Talk about the compromises they made, and do you think it fixes the problem with the public option? Because I say this isn't government-run healthcare. This is government-meddled healthcare, and that's the only thing that could be worse.
Well, I mean, government is very involved in healthcare. Federal government, I think, is really the leading force in the design of our system today, and the rules and the tax policy. So, without a doubt, it's the most highly regulated sector I think we have. But this is interesting, and the evolution of the bill, I think, in some ways, evolving back to where it was last year is kind of almost the way I see it, with an interesting twist. So, and it would just pass its first committee of reference earlier this week. Will be heard more in the House next week, and will continue to make its way through the process. It's quite interesting. And I on one hand, they've made some substantive reforms, right? The state authority, or the ability for the state to create its own quasi-state entity to compete directly against private insurance companies. They removed that. And as I said, kind of reverts back to last year's efforts where, if these price targets for carriers are not met, it would trigger the ability for the commissioner to set reimbursement rates, to set what private carriers, insurance carriers pay physicians, hospitals, doctors, which is again where was designed last year. What's interesting, there's a lot to take out here, and I think the details matter. At a high level, the intervention, the rate setting government prices, I think, is problematic, rife with unintended consequences, and not necessarily a policy framework that promotes the sort of long-term sustainability and improvement of quality and access that we all want. But the details really matter. And last year, they spent a lot of time putting out a hospital by hospital specific rate setting, formula. And this time around, they've set these rates that are lower than where they were last year. So the details on these potential cuts and unintended consequences in some ways look more, more severe than what we saw last year. So there's a lot that I think needs to be understood and debated, and hopefully is, even though maybe some of the major players are no longer pushing as hard against it for those reforms. But I think some of the details really need to be thought through so we don't end up with some of the unintended consequences we've highlighted in our work and the long-term economic impacts. But what are you covering? What are you seeing?
Well, to me, this looks like the same thing as the oil and gas stuff. We passed Senate Bill 181, and last year Governor Polis said that he wasn't going to support any ballot initiatives. Oil and gas said they'd back away, and even the environmentalists said they'd back away and give Senate Bill 181 time to work to see what the environment looked like then. Healthcare is different for some reason. We're at the precipice of a major evolution in healthcare. Polis has done these things like reinsurance and all these other things to save people money on healthcare. And I've seen this bill before. I come from mob people, and maybe this bill has been tried in New York City, where they come in your business and said, nice place you got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. That's what this bill feels like to me, that if you don't undercut your prices, the government's going to come in and do it for you. When I first saw the bill, I said, I don't know if this is carrot or stick. It just seems like stick, stick, stick. I mean, where are the compromises here? And, you'd mentioned yesterday that there's been some polling that suggests that this is popular with people. I don't think you can trust that. Polling has gotten to be, a political stunt. You can get a poll to say pretty much anything you want if you ask the right question. And if somebody comes up and asks me if I want free money, I'm going to say yes every time. But I remember a couple of years ago, the Denver Chamber of Commerce, they were going to run this bid. They were going to run a ballot initiative to raise the gas tax. And I go, oh, don't worry. We got polling that shows that the public supports this. I doubted that. And sure enough, the ultimate poll on election day showed that the public didn't support that gas tax and hasn't supported gas taxes. But every time anybody's going to run a ballot initiative, they magically have polling to show that it's popular. I think that we're getting perspective without context, that people don't, see the full picture. And, in rural communities, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but they're being asked to listen to either politicians in Denver or a doctor in their rural community. So I don't think the public knows where they are on this. I just don't understand why we've got to do it right now. Do you?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I think the why now is something we've highlighted. We've tried to highlight, as you said, reinsurance has brought down premiums in these markets by over 30% in the last 2 years. With COVID, we know healthcare and among many other sectors have been stressed. So we don't know the financial outlook explicitly long-term and what those disruptive opportunities might be that locking in this system could harm as well. So I'm with you. I think what's interesting on the polling is the nuance, right? And I think there was an office. I think Governor Polis set up an office of saving people money on healthcare, right? If you were asked, hey, this is going to save you money, is this of interest to you? I agree. It seems like a very interesting, entertaining idea, and it's being sold as an option, right? But when you have to understand those unintended consequences, and I like you said, what questions the polling asks, how well informed are people on what the mechanisms are, and given it's evolved so much from where it started, you'd have to kind of be concerned about that from the get-go. So I agree, you can't just take a poll and a number at face value, but I think it reflects a sentiment. We also saw in some other polling around housing recently that talked about the degree to which people want some level of intervention in housing to force this affordability question. So I see it as an interesting analogy that the polling is indicating whether it's 80% favorable, 50% favorable, it indicates a pretty large favorability that people are really fed up. But it's a shame, and I think it's really our challenge to help people and public and legislators understand again more broadly. This comes with a heavy cost, a high cost, and the free enterprise system that we all participate in. You're in a business, the people voting, responding to these polls are in a business. It's really about understanding not just, hey, what am I getting out of this, but what are the broader stakeholders and how are they being impacted? And I think through this conversation on the public option, I think I've actually been encouraged that debate and that discussion on those impacts have really, I think, come to light. And the people who would be directly impacted in terms of physicians, patients, ultimately as well, have come forward. People in mountain communities, rural communities, and talked about these unintended consequences. I don't think that the iterations of the bill have really offset those concerns, but the debate is going on, and so I hope that, as you said, voters, whether it's the ballot or in their next time they take a poll on these things, ask these questions: what are the unintended consequences? How does this impact my business, my insurance, more broadly? It's not just about these limited price reductions, these mandates that create a framework, I think, that is going to be hard to live with for a while. So it's a little bit of a rant there, but I agree that it's concerning when we see these favorability, but the question is, are they really understanding the full impacts here? And I don't know, you might have a beat on that.
If we could believe polling, Hillary Clinton would have been president, and Ari Savaras would have been mayor of Denver, and John Hickenlooper would still be a barkeeper in Lodo. So, context for polling.
That's right. Well, we're not a polling companies, but we don't base our modeling off polling. So maybe a disclaimer here, but I thought it's interesting, and given your work in sort of looking at the stories of these, I thought it's interesting sort of point to bring up here and talk about. So what else? What else did we miss? What other questions Joey Bunch have burning? What I know you said you wanted to add a little bit of more decor to your background there. So
I need a plan. I need people to tell me what to do, to rate my room and tell me what I need to do to make it better. What do our viewers want to know about? I don't have anything to add.
Great.
What questions are we getting?
Great.
Anybody?
I think no more questions. We covered it all, Joey.
What about the politics of this? I wish Dick Wadhams were here so I could ask him. Has the pandemic helped or hurt Jared Polis? I don't know. You can look at the shutdowns. He's made some enemies there. Or does it even matter? Has Colorado moved so far to the left? I'm not seeing any Republicans step forward to challenging him. And we should be hearing names and seeing people right now. They've got George Rockler and Heidi Ganahl are two talented politicians, but they haven't thrown their hat into the ring yet. I just think, as we said before, there's still so much that hasn't been figured out yet, including, what the political fallout of all this is. Like I've always said, you can always count on Democrats to overreach, and you can always count on Republicans to misread the moment.
Are we at the end on that? Is that our ending right there, Joey?
It might be. I think I've made everybody mad. Look at independents. I don't think I made the independents mad, but I'll get back to him next time.
Yeah, no, I think the long term is what is really what maybe what, and fortunately we're at a moment maybe we can start talking about that and understanding it, and hopefully in the policy debate, and public option is yet to be written. Some of the housing policy, transportation has yet to be fully written. We can maybe mitigate some of these issues we've highlighted and going forward. So there's always hope, right?
Yeah. Well, Chris, this was great. Let's do it again sometime, and I'll bring the bottle of tequila next time if you'll bring Kristen.
Yeah, but hopefully we can do this live in person. But this has been great. Yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully people on the call enjoyed it. And if you do have any future questions for Joey, he's always an open door, and you'll get a straight answer. So thank you again, Joey, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Take care.